I had an opportunity to go live with my father, who I had met for the first time when I was 14 years old, and he was in San Diego. What I didn't know is that my father actually, and it makes sense now, he was a 40-year-old man. He couldn't have an 18-year-old girl living with him. So he dropped me off at his ex-wife's house. And there at his ex-wife's house, that's where I was going to go to college. However, John, the college was 20 miles away and there were no cars. So what I did is I hitchhiked 20 miles one way and 20 miles the other way to get to school and back. Now, what was interesting, John, is around this time, my life changed dramatically. I met and dated this amazingly handsome naval officer. And this summer, he and I will be celebrating our 48th wedding anniversary.
Hello and welcome to the GYFT Show. My guest today is Dr. Katie Nall.
Well, John, I don't know if I'm that interesting, but I will tell you a little bit about my passion. I live here in Florida, across the pond, if you will, and I have 3 perfect children. I've been married for way too long, or not long enough, depending on who you talk to. And because of my interest in math, I really wanted to help students overcome their fear and anxiety about math and test taking. And that led me to becoming an advanced master trainer in something called emotional freedom technique, EFT, or tapping. I use it to help all kinds of people, including executives, help them overcome their stress, help them, in fact, to dissolve their waffles, dissolve their worries, anxiety, fear, frustration, lethargy, exhaustion, and stress.
That's a very comprehensive answer, and I'm going to touch more on some of these issues that you've raised in your introduction. So, Katie, in layman's language, can you explain for the audience what are waffles?
So waffles are something we encounter every day. Every day we have to eat our waffles. Every day we have to eat our worries, our anxiety, our fear, our frustration, our lethargy, exhaustion, and stress. You know, John, life brings to us stress, and how we handle it can make a huge difference in our health, our productivity, in every aspect of our life. There's actually studies that have done that show that a little bit of stress is needed just to be able to get a little bit of productivity. And the more stress we get, we can actually increase our productivity until we hit our optimal point. At that point, the stress level, the waffles, if you will, actually decrease our productivity until we get to the point where we may be in the corner kind of covered up with a blanket because the stress is just overwhelming.
It's a very comprehensive answer, and I fully understand what you're saying because I'm a person who's suffered from burnout on 2 occasions in the past, and I brought it upon myself because I didn't deal very well with stressful situations at work, and I allowed the more extroverted person to use me as a dump, that they would offload all their emotional upheaval on me. And I'm the introvert, so I would take it on board and I would take it personal. So to carry on this conversation further, what is emotional freedom technique?
Emotional freedom technique, which is also called EFT or tapping, was developed in the early 1990s by Stanford-educated electrical engineer Gary Craig. Now you have to wonder, how did an electrical engineer get involved with helping people to relieve their stress? He was looking for answers for himself and had gotten involved with some psychologists, psychiatrists, medical physicians who were actually trying to help their own clients overcome stress. And in the process, what he found was that they were going back to traditional Chinese medicine and to the idea of meridians. Tapping is called a somatic method. That means it involves tapping on the body in very specific points while you are saying surprisingly negative statements. Now, John, we've been taught all our lives to be positive and to have those positive affirmations. And what I have concluded is that until we get the negative out of our system, get it out of our body, we don't have room for the positive to come in.
Thank you for that. And another question for you there, Katie, is how did you feel as a person when you earned your PhD in mathematical education?
John, when I was 18 years old, I made a list of 5 things I wanted to accomplish by the time I was 25, because I had read that people who make lists actually accomplish more than those who don't. Number 1 on my list was to earn my PhD by the time I was 25. I had no idea what a PhD was. I just knew that it was the highest level of education I could get. After being raised by a single mom and being the oldest of 3 children and being moved around so much, I wanted some kind of financial security. And to me, it seemed like education was going to help me get that. Number 2 on the list, John, I had buy a house. And I remember writing in parentheses, I didn't care if it had furniture or not. Now, why was that important to me? Well, that single mom with her 3 kids, we moved frequently. I went to 12 different schools in 5 different states. Number 3 was I was going to have a car paid for by the time I was 25. I cannot remember what number 4 was, but number 5 was actually I was going to begin dating at 25 because I had all these goals to accomplish, right? What actually happened at age 25 is I was working on my master's degree. So I was like, okay, I'm moving in that direction. That's great. I hadn't bought a house, but I was living as a manager at an apartment complex. So I kind of gave myself credit. I did have a car paid for, and you'll recognize the car. It was a British Leyland TR6. And that number 5, I actually had been married for 5 years and pregnant with my first. There was no mention of marriage or children in there. So what happened? By the time I was in my mid-50s, I found myself working at a college. My youngest of 3 children was already over 25. And it was an opportunity for me to go back and accomplish my life goal. So I went and I studied. I was working full time. It took me 4 years to complete my PhD in mathematics education while I was working full time. And I have to tell you, John, the feeling that I had of being the oldest graduate there was fabulous. In fact, to tell you the truth, I was kind of trying to immobilize the group of graduates to convince them that after we got capped, they put the cap on us, that we should just walk out of the auditorium so we don't have to wait for everybody else. I failed in that, but I still got my PhD, and it was an incredibly proud moment. Thank you for asking. That was a great question.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive answer, and fair dues to you for sticking with it and having the confidence and the gumption to go ahead and study for your PhD and do all that research after you had your family in your 50s. That's a great accomplishment, and it's one to be very proud of. And looking back at my own life, I remember when I was 25 myself, and that's many years ago, I was determined I was going to start a personal pension fund with the hope of retiring at 55. I'm still working, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, maintaining that goal, John, makes all the difference in the world. So good for you.
Do you think along the road of life that you've learned from life's experience and that's made you a better person?
Wow, what a powerful question. My road has been rocky for a long time. Growing up, as I mentioned, we moved a lot. When I was a junior in high school, 11th grade in high school, things were not good in my home. So I ran away from home. I was actually homeless and living underneath the bushes for a while in Nebraska. It got cold. But I knew that education was important. I knew that I wanted to get my education. So I went to my high school counselor and I said, I need a place to live. After being outside for a while, I figured I couldn't stay that way for another year and a half. and they found a foster home for me. So I stayed in a foster home for a while. After the foster home, I had an opportunity to go live with my father, who I had met for the first time when I was 14 years old, and he was in San Diego. It was a real thrill to be able to leave Nebraska and go to San Diego. I mean, great town, beautiful beaches. It was fabulous. What I didn't know is that my father actually, and it makes sense now, he was a 40-year-old man. He couldn't have an 18-year-old girl living with him. So he dropped me off at his ex-wife's house. And there at his ex-wife's house, that's where I was going to go to college. However, John, the college was 20 miles away and there were no cars. But I knew that education was going to be the difference for me. I knew that education was going to make the difference in my life. So what I did is I hitchhiked 20 miles one way and 20 miles the other way to get to school and back. Now, what was interesting, John, is around this time, my life changed dramatically. I met and dated this amazingly handsome naval officer. And you can kind of think of Top Gun for
Tom
any
Cruise.
Yes, exactly. He was so good looking. I accidentally stood him up on our first date, but this summer, he and I will be celebrating our 48th wedding anniversary.
That's a very happy story, ending, I should say, to a story. So fair play to you. And I hope you have many more years of a happy marriage together with your husband.
Oh, did I say it was happy? I'm sorry. No. It was long. It is long term. It is a happy marriage. We laugh a lot.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Well done to the pair of you. What advice would you have for the quiet, introverted person who struggles to find their voice or to put their point of view forward in a meeting?
I have a heart for introverted people. I feel that a lot of them feel like nobody wants to hear what they have to say. And I want them to know that everybody wants to hear what they have to say. Because my husband and one of my children are introverted, and they're challenged by, waiting to get the moment to say. And I would tell them to practice talking to people, friendly people. You can talk to me. I love hearing, but to get your voice. And of course, I would always suggest tapping, because tapping has helped so many people overcome that fear and anxiety of not wanting to be able to speak out. I think that introverted people have a lot to say. When they say still waters run deep, and everyone I have known who's been introverted has these nuggets of gold that they just drop from time to time. And I want to sit by and wait and listen, because when they drop those nuggets of gold, you got to capture them quickly. So yeah, it's okay to speak out, and it's okay to say something that, maybe doesn't make sense or look at extroverted people like me. I say stuff all the time that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't stop me. To just have the voice and speak out. We are waiting to hear what you have to say.
That's a fantastic answer. And I have to say, as a young professional person myself, I was introverted and I struggled to put my point of view forward in meetings. And one of the things I used to suffer from was, I'm going to say X, and I have repeated over and over in my own mind. And before he knew it, the meeting was over and I'd lost my chance. I should have just said what I wanted to say. And I learned that from experience. And then when I joined Toastmasters, and I partook in the table topic session, I became a much better in the moment speaker. And that gave me the confidence to put my point of view forward in meetings thereafter. What are higher powers and what are lower powers? And how does a person know which one they possess?
Ooh, higher powers and lower powers. Can you give me additional information on that? Because what I'm thinking of may be different than what you're thinking of.
I just saw on your website today that you've written a book about meditation.
Okay. Okay. So to me, higher powers are our communication with a higher power. Some people refer to God, some call it spirit, some call it universe, some call it higher power. But yes, thank you for mentioning that. A higher power is something greater than ourselves, something that has control over things that we don't have control of. I would consider much of humanity, and specifically me, being a lower power, that I am on the lower rung looking up, asking for assistance all the time, all day long, from all the higher powers.
I have a question here for you, Katie. You have I'll start again. You have 3 children. I presume all of those children have been to university or at least to college. What advice did you give to your children when they embarked on their journey to university?
Oh, John, that's a great question. All 3 of our children did graduate high school. I'm happy to report none of them are in jail. All of them are alive. And every morning I give thanks just for that. They did continue on to go to college, and they also, all 3 of them went on to do graduate school, which I was kind of surprised but proud. The advice that I gave them was to follow their dreams. Now, I probably would give them different advice today than I did back then. As it turned out, John, all 3 of them ended up studying different branches of psychology. I think that what they wanted to do was to find out what was wrong with their daddy and me, rather than to find out what's wrong with themselves. But they are now, our oldest one earned his master's degree in an MBA, Master's of Business Administration, and he's a vice president at a bank. Our second son went off to become a chiropractor, so he went to chiropractic graduate school, and he and his wife are both chiropractors. And then our daughter, against my wishes, went to law school, and both she and my husband are attorneys. The one thing I did tell them is that I hope that they took classes, regardless of what they study, to take classes in advertising so that they would understand how advertising works and what people are always trying to sell us, that they take classes in accounting, because if you're not watching your money, I can guarantee you somebody else is. And I wanted them to take classes in speech so that they could be able to communicate with others in a clear manner. I always, of course, as a mathematician, all their lives, and we have 5 adorable granddaughters, in casual conversation, I end up sprinkling the conversation with something to do with math and to keep them thinking in a logical manner.
As a mathematician, you've got a great and well-developed logical side. How developed is your emotional side?
You know, John, I struggle with that because I have my logical side kind of dictates it and says, okay, well, this happens and that happens and that happens. And I have to really dig. I have to really kind of find out what my feelings are, what my emotions are. And of course, you know, growing up as the oldest child of the family structure I told you about, I was in charge of a lot of things. So I was the one who was always kind of trying to figure things out and masking my emotions. And probably, to tell you the truth, John, I think a lot of the interest and the work that I do in emotional freedom technique is trying to help myself, right? Trying to overcome these blockages that I have, that in my deepest part of my psyche, trying to find a way to bring forth those emotions, and especially to pull up those negative emotions and dispel them. And I know I still have a lot of work to do.
That's a very comprehensive answer and a very truthful answer. So thank you for that. And I know at times in the past, I struggled to express my feelings or emotions. But over the last couple of years, through my membership of the Professional Speaking Association, which is the UK and Ireland equivalent of the National Speakers Association, I've become a much better storyteller. And that's because of the fact that I'm able to tell my story and get it out there. And I want to help people that they won't make the same mistake that I made in my past career, which was to take a redundancy situation. That's what we call it in the UK and Ireland. We call it job loss in the US, that I took too much to heart. And instead of embracing a constructive challenge, I went into myself and had a very negative view of the world for a couple of years. Thankfully, that's all of the past now. And I now help people who've been made redundant from their jobs to either get back into full-time employment or start a business of their dreams. What would you recommend when you have a mixture of people in a room? So you have extroverts and introverts in a meeting. The extrovert they're loud and dominant, while the introvert may feel they're quiet and timid, even though they may have good ideas to put forward. They just struggle with that. How do you level the playing field in that instance?
That's a great management question. And I've done research on this in different roles that I've had in the past. I've been an executive director of different organizations and management. And what I found, and research backs this up, is that a lot of people talk about collaboration. Studies have shown that the best ideas come when people individually write them down on a separate piece of paper before they collaborate. So I would have everyone in the room, I would present the issue, and then I would ask everyone in the room to do their own work by themselves and present their issue on a piece of paper and their solution. After that, then I would have them get together in small groups, maybe 2 or 3, and make sure that there were more introverts than there were extroverts. And then have everybody share within the small group what their ideas were, and have out of that the top 2 or 3 ideas. And then keep combining the groups until you get to the best 2 or 3 ideas out of the entire room. That way, the introverts have a voice without having to actually speak it. They can write whatever they want and give people sufficient enough time to be able to write, right? And not say, okay, you've only got 10 more seconds, but to give them time to be able to get their thoughts on paper and go from there.
So it's all about preparation. I like the word collaboration. And I think all too often in industry, I've seen this all too often in the past myself, is where people confuse or mix up the word collaboration with compromise. Now, compromise, in my opinion, is a win-lose situation. Collaboration is win-win, where all parties come out of the negotiation process satisfied that they've got something from it. And I think what you're getting at there is the whole area of being prepared before you go to a meeting. So I think that's something that I would recommend to people is don't go to meetings unprepared. If you know what the agenda is, think about it and what you want to say or what your point of view is, and go to that meeting with your thoughts on paper. That will help you a lot in terms of putting your ideas forward. That's a great recommendation. When your children went out to the workplace, what advice did you give them as a parent?
You know, I didn't give them that much advice, John, when my children went to the workplace. I'm a big believer that the greatest influence we have on our children is the first 5 years. And I kind of let them sink or swim. A lot of what my children did in the workplace, I probably wouldn't have endorsed. I know one of the kids took a busboy job. They were cleaning off dishes after, people ate. And he was there for about 2 hours and he came home early. And I said, "Oh, did you have an early shift?" It was his first day. He said, "I quit." I said, "Why did you quit?" He said, "Everybody was yelling at me." And I thought, that's what they do in restaurants. They're trying to get things done. So on one hand, I was surprised, but on the other hand, internally, I was a little proud that they weren't going to accept that kind of treatment. And I find that all three of my kids are pretty determined to voice their own rights and are willing to accept their responsibilities. I think that was the only job they quit like that. But it showed to me that my children had self-confidence and self-esteem to be able to know what was going to work for them and also what was acceptable for them. And I think that sometimes we swallow all of that for the little bit of money we get paid in a salary or in an hourly position. So I think they turned out okay, but I didn't give too much advice. In fact, they probably gave me more advice. They give me more advice than I give them.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is that that son or daughter in that particular case, they were very good at setting boundaries, and they decided for themselves that they weren't going to be shouted at. They wanted to be taken seriously. They wanted to be respected in their job. And the restaurant scenario was not for them. And they decided to look for something better. And I think that's to be applauded because there's far too many people in the workplace who just put up with hassle at the very least because they're under pressure to earn a salary, to pay the mortgage, to pay the car loan, to pay for the children in university, to pay for the holiday. And they just don't have the wherewithal to say, enough is enough, I'm off, goodbye. But perhaps that's going to change with the so-called great resignation that we're hearing so much about in the very near future. Looking over the whole of your life, Katie, aside from your Ph.D. in mathematical education, what has been your greatest achievement?
Wow. I think not killing my children and husband when they frustrate me is probably my greatest achievement. No, I'm blessed. I'm really blessed, John. I mean, I have a husband who loves me and whom I love. I have 3 children who all still speak to me and allow me in their home. I have 5 of the most adorable granddaughters. I've had a blessed life. And I think my greatest achievement is being able to share tapping and its effect with others. We mentioned earlier about the challenges of identifying feelings. And I actually found that was a concern for some of the clients that I had worldwide. Some of them couldn't identify their feelings. So I did some research and I actually found a gentleman in the UK, and I'm finishing up a form of tapping that is picture tapping. So I'm always looking for solutions. I'm always looking for how can I help the next person, right? And that's probably my greatest achievement.
This has been a very interesting interview today with today, Dr. Katie. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the audience for appearing on the GYFT Show. And for me, the biggest takeaway from today's show is, in terms of your own life, has been to be able to express your emotions and your feelings because you're very much the logical person. And developing that emotional side has been a big challenge for you. And that's what you want to help your clients to do. And that's a very, very commendable thing. And I think in terms of people who've been made redundant, this is a mistake I made myself where I took redundancy far too personal and I went into myself. If you're feeling down because you've been made redundant, it's important that you speak to somebody who's qualified to help you to get you back on track. And in terms of the audience, we all have ups and downs in life. I think that don't let your feelings build up inside you. You have to be able to express your feelings in a coherent way. So I think for anybody who's struggling in that area, get help. That would be my major takeaway from today's show. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to thank Katie for appearing on the GYFT Show today. Have you got an offer for the audience?
Yes, John, I'm so excited to give a gift to the GYFT Show. Tapping is a technique that has specific points. And there is I have a chart that has those points detailed in a picture. When they go to my website, and they can request it, and I'll shoot it right off to them.